The transport ships descended through the orange clouds of Baron 7, like metal raindrops falling into hell. Rebecca Chen pressed her face against the small window and watched the rocky landscape grow larger below them. Sharp mountains jutted up like broken teeth, and rivers of what looked like liquid metal snaked between them. This was not a place where anything should be able to live. "Attention all competitors," announced the mechanical voice over the ship's speakers. "Welcome to the first Intergalactic Survival Challenge. You have 30 standard days to prove your species can endure what this planet offers. The rules are simple. Survive using only what you brought with you." Rebecca looked around at her 5 human teammates. David was checking his backpack for the 10th time. Lisa sat quietly, her hands folded over her simple medical kit. The others were going through their gear one more time, making sure everything was secure. Their equipment looked so basic compared to what the other species had brought. Through the transparent walls of the transport bay, Rebecca could see the other ships landing nearby. The crystalline beings from the Shard Collective stepped out of their ship surrounded by shimmering energy fields. Their equipment floated beside them in perfect formation, each piece glowing with internal power. One of them gestured, and a dome of light appeared around their landing site, pushing away the toxic atmosphere. "Look at that," whispered David. "They already have a perfect shelter set. Up." The aquatic tidewalkers emerged from their vessel in environmental suits that seemed to create their own weather. Small clouds formed around them, raining clean water that they collected in floating containers. Their technology turned the poisonous air into breathable atmosphere and extracted pure water from the planet's contaminated soil. The insectoid hive minds moved like a single organism. Hundreds of them poured out of their ship, immediately beginning construction of a complex base. They communicated through flashing lights and built structures that seemed to grow from the ground itself. Within minutes, they had established a small city. "Impressive," said Lisa, but she did not sound worried. More ships landed. The gas-based drift cloud species floated in containment fields that let them maintain their natural form while interacting with solid matter. The plant-like root singers extended tendrils that immediately began converting the hostile soil into something they could use for nutrition. Each species brought technology that seemed like magic. Energy shields, matter converters, atmospheric processors, quantum communicators. The equipment hummed with power and sophistication. Then there were the humans. Rebecca's team carried simple backpacks filled with basic tools. Water purification tablets, multi-tools, rope, tarps, fire starters, first aid supplies, and emergency food rations. Everything was designed to work without power sources or complex systems. As the human team walked away from their transport, carrying their modest gear, the sounds of alien laughter filled the thin air. "Did you see what the humans brought?" one of the shard beings said to another, its crystalline voice ringing like broken glass. "Stone Age tools. How primitive." A Tidewalker's translator device carried its amusement across the landing field. "I expected more from the species that claims to be adaptable. They look like they are going camping, not competing in a survival challenge." The hive minds communicated in rapid light patterns, but their meaning was clear from their body language. They found the human equipment amusing. 30 days on Baron 7 with basic hand tools," said one of the root singers, its voice like wind through leaves. "The humans will not last a week." Rebecca heard the comments but said nothing. She had expected this reaction. Throughout galactic history, other species had always underestimated humanity's approach to problem-solving. They saw primitive tools where humans saw reliability. They saw simple solutions where humans saw efficiency. "Let them laugh," she said quietly to her team. "We know what we are doing." The challenge officials, a council of beings from 12 different worlds, gathered the competitors together. The head official, a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms, addressed the group. "This planet will test every aspect of your survival abilities," the official announced. "The temperature swings from freezing to boiling every 12 hours. The atmosphere is toxic to most life forms. The water is contaminated with heavy metals and acid. Dangerous predators hunt both day and night. Weather patterns include electrical storms, dust hurricanes, and acid rain." The alien competitors looked confident. Their technology could handle anything this world offered. "Additionally," the official continued, "you must remain within the designated survival zone. No rescue missions will be launched if you fail. This is a test of true survival, not just endurance." Rebecca studied the landscape around them. Rocky outcroppings offered potential shelter from the worst weather. She could see areas where water might collect during the acid rains, places that could be purified and used. The terrain was hostile, but it was not impossible. Teams will be monitored by orbital observation stations, the official said. Galactic media will broadcast your progress to worlds across the universe. This event will determine which species truly understand survival. As the official finished speaking, the first day began. The alien teams immediately activated their advanced equipment. Energy barriers went up. Atmospheric processors began working. Sophisticated shelters materialized from compact devices. The human team walked to a rocky area that offered some natural protection from wind. Rebecca unpacked her tarp and began showing the others how to create a simple lean-to shelter using rope and the natural rock formations. "Are we really going to do this with just these basic tools?" asked David, looking at the impressive alien installations being built around them. "These tools have kept humans alive for thousands of years," Rebecca replied, testing the strength of their rope lines. "They work when everything else fails." As the first night fell on Baron 7, the alien camps glowed with artificial lights and hummed with the sound of advanced machinery. The human camp was dark except for a small, carefully contained fire that Rebecca had started using a basic flint and steel. The temperature began to drop toward freezing. The toxic atmosphere grew thicker. Somewhere in the distance, something howled with a sound that made everyone's skin crawl, but the humans were ready. They had faced worse than this planet before, using nothing but their wits and simple tools. They knew something the other species had not yet learned. Sometimes the most advanced technology was knowing how to survive without any technology at all. The challenge had begun, and humanity was about to teach the galaxy a lesson in true survival. 7 days into the challenge, the Galactic Broadcasting Network was having a field day. Viewers across 12 star systems tuned in to watch what many considered the most entertaining survival show ever produced. The betting pools had reached astronomical numbers, and the odds were not in humanity's favor. Day 7 update, announced the news anchor, a floating blob of sentient gas called Wisp. The Shard Collective continues to dominate with their perfect environmental domes. Inside their crystalline barriers, they have maintained exactly 22 degrees and perfect humidity. Their energy-to-matter converters have produced comfortable furniture and gourmet meals. The broadcast showed the interior of the Shard camp. The crystalline beings moved gracefully through their transparent shelter, completely protected from the harsh conditions outside. Their equipment provided everything they needed with perfect efficiency. Meanwhile, Wisp continued, the Tidewalkers have established what can only be described as an oasis in this wasteland. The camera shifted to show the aquatic species camp. Their atmospheric processors had created a bubble of clean, humid air. Devices extracted pure water from the poisoned ground and maintained perfect temperature control. They had even created a small artificial lake where they could rest in their natural aquatic form. The hive minds show why collective intelligence dominates individual thinking, the anchor went on. Their coordinated construction efforts have built a fortress that could withstand anything this planet offers. The insectoid camp was indeed impressive. Hundreds of worker units had built walls, towers, and underground tunnels. Their quantum communication network allowed instant coordination across the entire facility. They had even begun mining operations to extract useful materials from the planet's crust. The root singers have turned a section of dead ground into a thriving garden, Wisp reported. Their biotechnology has transformed the toxic soil into fertile earth that now grows their native foods. Each alien camp was a marvel of advanced technology perfectly adapted to overcome Baron 7's challenges. Viewers across the galaxy watched in amazement as species after species demonstrated their technological superiority. And then, Wisp said, his tone shifting to barely contained amusement, we have the humans. The camera panned across the human camp, and audience members throughout the galaxy began placing new bets on how much longer the primitive species would last. The human shelter looked pathetic compared to the alien installations. A simple lean-to made from tarps and rope, built against a rock wall for protection. No energy barriers, no atmospheric processing, no advanced construction. Just basic materials arranged to provide minimal protection from the environment. Rebecca knelt beside their small fire, slowly heating water in a metal pot. She added one of their precious purification tablets and waited for it to dissolve. This was how they had been getting clean water for 7 days, one tablet at a time, one pot at a time. Primitive water purification methods, Wisp commented. The humans are still boiling water like their ancestors did thousands of years ago. David was working on their shelter, using his multi-tool to tighten the rope lines. The wind had been getting stronger each day, and their simple structure needed constant maintenance. Lisa was checking their supply of medical equipment, counting bandages and antiseptic wipes. Basic hand tools and manual labor, the broadcast continued. While other species enjoy the comfort of advanced technology, the humans struggle with elementary survival tasks. But the cameras did not show everything. They did not capture Rebecca carefully studying weather patterns and animal tracks. They missed David's detailed mental map of water sources and shelter locations. They failed to notice Lisa's growing understanding of the planet's dangerous plants and how to avoid them. The human team was learning Baron 7 in ways the other species never could from inside their technological barriers. Current betting odds, Wisp announced, show the Shard Collective at 2-to-1 favorites, followed by the Tidewalkers and Hive Minds. The humans have dropped to 50-to-1 against, with most experts predicting their elimination within the next 3 days. On the planet's surface, other alien teams were beginning to notice the betting odds as well. The drift cloud beings floated past the human camp daily, their containment fields humming with power. They often stopped to observe the humans' primitive activities with what could only be described as scientific curiosity. How do they expect to survive 30 days with such basic equipment? One of them asked another through their translation device. The crystalline beings were even more direct in their observations. Their technology level appears to be several thousand years behind galactic standards, one shard being told a news crew. It is remarkable that they were even allowed to participate in this challenge. The root singers had grown bored with watching human activities. They dig in the dirt like animals, one of them said dismissively. There is no elegance to their methods, no harmony with natural systems. But not all observations were dismissive. Some aliens had begun to notice things that the broadcasts missed. A group of the insectoid hive minds had been monitoring all the other camps as part of their strategic planning. One of their scouts reported something unusual about the human behavior patterns. The humans are not simply surviving, the scout communicated through rapid light flashes. They are studying. They observe everything, they test, they learn. Learning what? Replied the hive commander. How to be more primitive. Unknown, the scout responded. But they adapt their behavior every day based on new information. This is not random survival activity. This is systematic data collection. The Tidewalkers had noticed something similar. Their technology automatically monitored environmental conditions across the entire challenge area. Their sensors showed that the humans were the only species regularly moving beyond their base camp to explore the surrounding terrain. Why do they leave the safety of their shelter so frequently? Wondered one of the aquatic beings. Perhaps their primitive tools require constant resource gathering, suggested another. They were partially correct, but they missed the larger picture. The humans were not just gathering resources. They were building a comprehensive understanding of their environment that no technological barrier could provide. Rebecca returned to camp as the sun set on day 7. She had spent the afternoon exploring a canyon system 3 kilometers from their shelter. What she found there was information that might prove crucial in the days ahead. The weather is going to get worse, she told her team as they gathered around their small fire. Much worse. I found evidence of flash floods in those canyons. The rock formations show patterns of extreme temperature stress, and the animal tracks suggest that even the native predators take shelter during certain seasonal events. David looked up from his work on their equipment. Are you thinking we need to move? Maybe, Rebecca said. But more importantly, we need to be ready for conditions that might challenge even the most advanced technology. Lisa nodded. The other teams are completely dependent on their equipment. If anything disrupts their systems, then they will need to learn survival skills they do not currently possess, Rebecca finished. As night fell on Baron 7, the alien camps glowed with artificial light and hummed with the sound of advanced machinery. Entertainment shows across the galaxy featured comedians making jokes about human primitive technology, but the humans sat around their simple fire, sharing information and making plans based on direct observation of their environment. They were preparing for possibilities that the other species, secure in their technological superiority, had not even considered. The real test was still coming, and humanity was getting ready for it in the only way they knew how, by understanding their world well enough to survive whatever it might throw at them. The morning of Day 10 began like any other on Baron 7. The toxic orange sun rose through the polluted atmosphere, bringing its daily cycle of increasing heat and radiation. Across the survival zone, alien camps hummed with their usual technological efficiency. Then the star above them erupted. The solar flare started as a bright flash that made the already harsh sunlight seem dim by comparison. Within seconds, waves of electromagnetic energy raced across the planet's surface at the speed of light. The first sign of trouble came from the orbital monitoring stations. "All observation posts, this is Control," crackled a voice over the emergency channels. "Massive solar event in progress. All electronic systems show interference. Repeat, all systems are experiencing severe interference." On the planet's surface, the effects were immediate and devastating. The Shard Collective's perfect environmental domes began to flicker like dying light bulbs. The crystalline beings inside watched in growing alarm as their energy barriers wavered and sparked. Their matter converters made strange grinding noises before shutting down completely. "System failure in environmental control," one of them announced, its voice losing its usual musical quality as panic set in. "Backup generators are not responding." Their protective dome collapsed entirely within minutes. The toxic atmosphere of Baron 7 rushed in, and the Shard beings scrambled to activate emergency breathing apparatus that they had never expected to need. The Tidewalkers faced an even more immediate crisis. Their atmospheric processors had been working constantly to maintain their artificial oasis. When the electromagnetic pulse hit, the processors died with a sound like mechanical death rattles. The clean air in their camp began mixing with the planet's poison atmosphere. "Emergency protocols activated," one of them gasped through a failing filtration mask. "All personnel to backup life support." But their backup systems had been electronic too, and the solar flare had killed everything that depended on complex circuitry. The hive minds experienced something that their collective intelligence had never encountered: complete communication breakdown. Their quantum network died instantly, leaving hundreds of insectoids suddenly isolated in their own thoughts. The coordination that had built their impressive fortress disappeared, replaced by confusion and individual panic. Workers who had been in the middle of construction projects stopped mid-task, no longer able to receive instructions from the central command. The mining operations ceased. Even their basic life support systems began failing, as electromagnetic interference destroyed their electronic components. Across the challenge area, similar scenes played out. The drift cloud beings found their containment fields collapsing, forcing them to compress into emergency physical forms they had not used in centuries. The root singers watched their biotechnology die as the electromagnetic pulse disrupted the delicate electronic controls that managed their living systems. Species after species found themselves suddenly vulnerable to the full hostility of Baron 7. In the human camp, Rebecca looked up from the water she had been boiling and noticed the bright flash in the sky. "Solar flare," she said calmly, continuing to stir their morning water purification tablet into the pot. David glanced up from where he was checking their rope lines. "Big one?" "Probably," Rebecca replied. "Should we expect any problems?" Lisa examined their equipment with a practiced eye. Multi-tools, rope, tarps, fire starter, water purification tablets, first aid supplies. "Nothing here depends on electronics. We should be fine." And they were. While alien technology died around them, the humans continued their daily routine unchanged. Their fire still burned. Their water purification still worked. Their shelter, held together by knots and basic physics, showed no sign of stress. The first aliens to approach the human camp arrived within hours. 3 Shard beings stumbled across the rocky terrain, their crystalline bodies showing stress fractures from exposure to the toxic atmosphere. They had jury-rigged some kind of basic breathing apparatus, but it clearly was not designed for extended use. "Help," one of them managed to say through its translator, which was apparently one of the few electronic devices still functioning. "Our life support systems have failed." Rebecca looked at the beings who had been mocking human primitive technology just days before. They were clearly in distress, their usually perfect form showing signs of environmental damage. "You need clean air," she said simply. "Yes, but how?" the shard being replied. Our atmospheric processors are destroyed. Rebecca walked to their fire and picked up a piece of burning wood. Fire, she said. Burning organic material consumes the toxic gases in the atmosphere and produces cleaner air in a small area. Stay close to the smoke, but not so close that you inhale too much of it. The crystalline being stared at her in confusion. Fire, that is your solution? It works, Rebecca said. It has worked for humans for thousands of years. More aliens began arriving as the day progressed. Tidewalkers whose water purification had failed learned how to use basic filtration through cloth and sand, combined with boiling and chemical tablets. Hive minds who had lost their collective coordination discovered the value of simple verbal communication and individual decision-making. How are your systems still functioning? Asked a drift cloud being who had compressed into a barely stable physical form. David held up his multi-tool. No complex electronics, no computers, no quantum processors, just metal, springs, and human engineering. But that is so primitive, the alien replied. Primitive, but it works when advanced technology fails, Rebecca explained patiently. Throughout the day, more alien equipment failures occurred as the electromagnetic effects continued. Even systems that had initially survived began breaking down as secondary effects took hold. Power sources that had seemed unlimited began failing. Backup systems designed to last for weeks died within hours. By evening, only half of the original alien teams remained functional. The others had either suffered complete system failures or had been forced to abandon their camps when life support failed. The humans sat around their fire, sharing their evening meal of simple rations with a group of alien refugees who had sought shelter in their camp. Your technology is thousands of years behind galactic standards, said a root singer, who was learning to purify water with human methods. Yet you are the only ones whose equipment still functions normally. Maybe being behind is not always a disadvantage, Rebecca replied. Simple systems are harder to break. They can be repaired with basic tools. They do not depend on things beyond your control. A tidewalker who was learning to tend their fire added, On our homeworld, we have not needed to understand basic survival for generations. Our technology has always provided everything we needed. Technology is a tool, Lisa said, checking the bandages on a shard being whose crystalline structure had been damaged by atmospheric exposure. But tools can break. The knowledge of how to survive without them is what keeps you alive when they fail. As night fell on day 10, the landscape of the challenge had changed completely. The impressive alien installation stood dark and silent, their advanced technology reduced to expensive debris. Emergency shelters made from salvaged materials dotted the area as survivors tried to adapt to manual survival. But in the human camp, life continued as it had for the previous 9 days. Simple fire, basic shelter, hand-purified water, and careful resource management. The galactic audience watching the broadcasts were no longer laughing at human primitive technology. For the first time, they were beginning to understand that sometimes the most advanced approach was the one that worked when everything else failed. The real survival challenge was just beginning, and humanity was the only species that had been preparing for it all along. Day 18 brought new horrors to Baron 7. The morning sky turned an ominous green color as massive dust storms approached from 3 different directions. By afternoon, the first drops of acid rain began falling, each drop capable of eating through metal and causing severe chemical burns to exposed skin. The weather had been growing progressively worse since the solar flare 8 days earlier. What the aliens had initially seen as a temporary setback was revealing itself to be the beginning of the planet's seasonal weather cycle. Baron 7 was entering its storm season, and none of the advanced alien technology had been designed with this level of environmental hostility in mind. Rebecca stood at the edge of the human camp, watching the green clouds roll across the landscape like a poisonous tide. She had seen weather like this before, though never quite this extreme. Earth had taught humanity to prepare for conditions that could kill the unprepared in minutes. David, Lisa, she called to her teammates. Time to upgrade our shelter. This is going to be worse than anything we have faced so far. The human camp had changed significantly since the solar flare. What had started as a small lean-to had evolved into a more complex survival installation as they adapted to the planet's challenges and accommodated alien refugees who had sought their help. Rebecca pulled out a roll of plastic, sheeting that had been part of their basic supplies. It was nothing fancy, just heavy-duty waterproof material designed to shed moisture and resist tearing. Combined with their duct tape, it became the foundation for a shelter system that could protect against acid rain. "Help me understand this," said Kira, one of the Tidewalkers who had been learning human survival techniques. "Your species brought plastic sheeting to an advanced survival challenge?" "Waterproof barrier material," Rebecca corrected, beginning to stretch the plastic over their existing shelter frame. "It keeps acid rain from dissolving us." David was using their multi-tool to create drainage channels around their shelter area. The simple knife blade cut grooves in the rock that would direct corrosive runoff away from their living space. "But surely there must be more advanced materials available," said Zen, a shard being whose crystalline structure had been slowly healing since learning to stay near the human fire. "Energy-resistant barriers, molecular shields, atmospheric repulsion fields, all of which require power sources and complex systems," Lisa replied, helping Rebecca secure the plastic with rope and duct tape. "What happens when those systems fail?" As if summoned by her question, the first real acid rain began to fall. The drops hit the ground with a hissing sound, creating small clouds of toxic vapor wherever they landed. The remaining alien technology scattered across the challenge area began dissolving even faster. The plastic sheeting performed exactly as designed. The acid rain beaded up and rolled off, following the drainage channels David had cut. Their shelter remained dry and safe. But not all the aliens had learned these lessons yet. A group of root singers had attempted to create natural acid resistance using their biotechnology. Their solution involved growing thick, waxy leaves that should have repelled the corrosive rain. Unfortunately, the acid on Baron 7 was stronger than anything their homeworld had prepared them for. The leaves began dissolving within minutes. "Emergency shelter," their leader called out as his protective foliage melted away. "We need emergency shelter now." Rebecca looked at their small camp already crowded with alien refugees. "We can expand the plastic coverage, but you will need to help with the construction." The root singers had never built anything with their own appendages before. Their species had used biotechnology in living systems for so long that manual construction was a completely foreign concept. "Show us," the leader said desperately as the acid rain intensified. What followed was a crash course in basic engineering. Rebecca demonstrated how to use rope to create tension frameworks. David showed them how duct tape could seal joints and reinforce connections. Lisa explained weight distribution and water runoff patterns. "Your multi-tool," observed one of the drift cloud beings who had compressed into solid form to work on the shelter. "It contains at least 12 different functions, yet it is entirely mechanical." David held up the device, pointing out its various components. Knife, saw, scissors, screwdrivers, pliers, wire cutters, can opener, file, awl, and ruler. All the basic tools you need for most construction and repair tasks. "But no power source," the alien noted. "No power source needed," David replied, using the pliers function to twist wire that was securing part of their expanded shelter. "It works as long as the metal holds together, and metal is very hard to destroy." The concept of mechanical advantage without electronic assistance was revolutionary to species that had not used purely physical tools in centuries. As the storm worsened, more aliens found their way to the expanding human camp. The hive minds who had lost their collective communication discovered that verbal coordination, while slower than quantum networking, was actually more flexible for adapting to changing situations. "In our hive system," explained one of the insectoid beings, "all decisions come from central processing. When central processing fails, no decisions can be made." "Human groups work differently," Rebecca said, showing the alien how to tie a basic knot that would hold under stress. "Every individual can make decisions based on the situation they observe. It is less efficient but more adaptable." The alien tried the knot several times before getting it right. "Your species has backup systems for backup systems. We call it redundancy," Lisa said. "If one approach fails, you have another approach ready. If that fails, you have a third approach. You keep having alternatives until you find something that works." By day 19, the human camp had become a teaching center for basic survival skills. Aliens who had arrived with advanced degrees in quantum engineering and biotechnology were learning to start fires with flint and steel. Species that had not touched raw materials in generations were discovering the satisfaction of building something with their own appendages. I do not understand, said Wisp, the gas-based reporter whose containment field had been replaced by a crude but functional pressure suit made from salvaged materials. Your technology appears primitive, yet it consistently outperforms our advanced systems. Rebecca was teaching a group of mixed aliens how to purify water using a combination of filtration, boiling, and chemical treatment. Advanced is not always better, she explained. Sometimes the best solution is the one that works reliably under any conditions. But efficiency, protested a shard being. Our matter converters could produce pure water from base elements in seconds. When they worked, Rebecca pointed out. How long do they take to produce water when the power is off? The alien had no answer for that question. As the acid storms continued into day 20, something remarkable was happening across the challenge area. Aliens who had never questioned their dependence on technology were learning to value human approaches to problem solving. A tidewalker named Flo had become expert at using the multi-tool for various construction tasks. The flexibility of this device is remarkable, she told her companions. It adapts to whatever situation you encounter. A hive mind called Worker 7 had discovered that individual decision-making allowed for creative solutions that collective processing had never considered. When I work alone, he explained, I can try different approaches without consulting the central command. Some of them work better than the standard procedures. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the aliens viewed failure itself. Their advanced societies had been built around technologies that worked perfectly, or not at all. The concept of partial failure, workarounds, and backup plans was completely foreign to them. Human engineering assumes that things will break, observed Zen, the shard being who had become one of Rebecca's most attentive students. Your systems are designed to continue functioning even when major components fail. Things always break eventually, Rebecca replied, using duct tape to repair a small tear in their shelter that had been caused by wind-blown debris. Good design plans for that reality. As day 18 ended, the human camp had grown into a small village of mixed species, all working together using human survival techniques. The galactic audience watching the broadcasts was beginning to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Advanced alien civilizations learning from a species they had dismissed as primitive. The real lesson was not about technology at all. It was about the human approach to an uncertain universe, where the most valuable skill was the ability to adapt and keep going when everything around you was falling apart. The storms were getting worse, but humanity was teaching the galaxy how to weather them. The ground beneath Baron 7 shook like a living thing in pain. Day 25 had begun with what the orbital monitoring stations called a minor seismic event. But minor on this planet meant something that would have been catastrophic on most civilized worlds. Rebecca felt the vibrations through the soles of her boots as she checked their morning water purification. The tremors had been growing stronger for hours, and her experience told her that something much bigger was coming. Everyone stay calm, she called to the mixed group of aliens who had been learning human survival techniques. But we need to prepare for ground movement, major ground movement. The words were barely out of her mouth when Baron 7 decided to show them what a real earthquake looked like. The planet's surface buckled and twisted like fabric being shaken out. Rock formations that had stood for millions of years cracked and fell. The carefully constructed alien installations that had survived the solar flare and acid storms were reduced to scattered debris in seconds. Most devastating of all, the underground water sources and supply caches that several alien teams had been depending on disappeared into newly formed crevasses in the ground. When the shaking stopped, Rebecca stood up slowly and looked around. Their basic camp had survived because there had been nothing rigid to break. The plastic sheeting had flexed with the ground movement. The rope had stretched and held. The simple fire pit had scattered but could be rebuilt in minutes. Is everyone accounted for? She called out. The roll call revealed that they had lost no one from their group. The same could not be said for the other camps across the challenge area. David was already moving to check their equipment, his multi-tool in hand to make any necessary repairs. Lisa was examining each team member for injuries. It was a routine they had practiced many times during their years of survival training. How did you know to prepare for this? Asked Flo, the tidewalker who had become proficient with human construction techniques. Earthquake preparation is basic survival knowledge where I come from, Rebecca replied, beginning to assess what they would need to repair or replace. You always assume the ground might move when you are in an unstable area. Zen, the shard being, was examining the remains of what had been an advanced shelter built by another alien team. The structure had been engineered to precise specifications and built from the strongest materials available. When the earthquake hit, it had shattered like glass. Your shelter bent instead of breaking, Zen observed. This should not be possible. Flexible materials are weaker than rigid ones. Flexible materials are stronger in different ways, Rebecca explained. They can absorb stress instead of fighting it. When forces are too strong to resist, you adapt to them instead. This was the moment when the fundamental difference between human and alien engineering became clear to everyone watching the challenge. Worker 7, the hive mind who had been learning individual decision-making, was studying the scattered remains of his species' fortress. Our construction was perfect, he said in confusion. Every joint calculated for maximum strength. Every wall built to resist the greatest possible forces. But what happens when the forces are greater than the greatest possible? Lisa asked gently. The alien had no answer. His species had never planned for impossible scenarios. As the day progressed, teams of survivors from across the challenge area began arriving at the human camp. Most had lost everything in the earthquake except what they carried with them. 4 entire species had been eliminated from the challenge when their life support systems were destroyed. By evening, only 4 groups remained active: the humans, a small band of adaptable shapeshifters called the Changewalkers, 2 drift cloud beings who had learned to function in solid form, and a single Tidewalker who had been studying human techniques since day 10. We need to understand something, said Wave, the surviving Tidewalker, as the mixed group gathered around the human fire. Your species brought the most basic equipment to this challenge. Yet you are the only ones who have not lost a single team member. Rebecca poked at their fire with a stick, sending sparks up into the toxic atmosphere. We brought equipment that could not fail in ways that would kill us. Explain this concept, requested Shift, one of the Changewalkers whose natural adaptability had helped her species survive the various disasters. David held up his multi-tool again, but this time his explanation was different. This tool has 12 functions. If one function breaks, I still have 11 others. If half the functions break, I can still accomplish most tasks. Even if only the knife blade works, I can still cut, pry, scrape, and dig. Redundancy, added Lisa. Every piece of equipment we brought has multiple uses. Every essential function can be accomplished in multiple ways. We do not depend on any single system for survival. The concept was revolutionary to species that had built their entire civilizations around specialized, highly efficient single-purpose technologies. Zen held up a piece of human duct tape, examining its simple structure. This material is remarkable. It bonds to almost any surface. It resists water, acid, heat, and tearing. It can be used for construction, repair, medical applications, and waterproofing. And when it fails, Rebecca added, you can see the failure clearly and fix it by adding more tape or replacing the damaged section. Our energy barriers either worked perfectly or failed completely, Zen said thoughtfully. There was no middle ground, no partial function, no manual repair option. Worker 7 was examining human rope with new understanding. Rope is not a single component. It is thousands of individual fibers working together. When some fibers break, the remaining fibers continue to provide function. That is the human approach to everything, Rebecca said. Individual parts that can work together but do not depend entirely on each other for basic function. As night fell on day 25, the remaining survivors sat around the human fire and discussed what they had learned. The shapeshifters talked about how human adaptability reminded them of their own species' approach to survival. The drift cloud beings shared observations about how human flexibility resembled their natural ability to change form based on environmental needs. But the most profound revelations came from the aliens, who had built their entire existence around technological perfection. On my homeworld, said Wave, we have not experienced equipment failure in over 1,000 years. Our technology is so advanced that we forgot it could break at all. What do you do when something breaks? Asked Lisa. We replace it with identical technology, Wave replied. But here, replacement is impossible. Repair is the only option. And human technology is designed to be repaired, David said. with basic tools using materials you can find or make yourself. Zen was working on a small project, using human techniques to repair a piece of his damaged crystalline structure with metal wire and organic binding material. Your approach assumes that perfect conditions will never exist, he observed. Because perfect conditions never do exist, Rebecca replied. There is always something unexpected. Always something that breaks at the worst possible moment. Always something you did not plan for. Flo had been quiet for most of the conversation, but now she spoke up. Your species has backup plans for the backup plans. We call it contingency planning, Lisa said. Always assume that your first solution will not work and have a second solution ready. Assume the second solution will fail and have a third solution, prepared. But this must be terribly inefficient, protested Shift. Inefficient systems that work are better than efficient systems that fail, Rebecca said simply, as the fire burned lower. The surviving aliens began to understand something that would change their entire perception of human technology. What they had seen as primitive was actually sophisticated in ways their advanced civilizations had never considered. The challenge was almost over, but the real learning was just beginning. Across the galaxy, billions of viewers were witnessing a fundamental shift in how they understood survival, technology, and the relationship between efficiency and reliability. Humanity was not just winning the survival challenge. They were teaching the universe a new way to think about living in an uncertain world. Day 30 arrived with the pale orange sunrise that had greeted the survivors every morning for a month on Baron 7. But this morning was different. This was the last sunrise of the Intergalactic Survival Challenge, and only 2 teams had managed to complete the full 30-day ordeal. Rebecca stood at the edge of their camp, looking out over a landscape transformed by disaster, where 12 proud alien installations had once stood. Only debris and empty ground remained. The planet had tested every species that dared to challenge it, and most had been found wanting. But humanity was still here. Final day, David said, joining her at the observation point. Their equipment was arranged neatly around them, much of it showing wear from 30 days of constant use, but all of it still functional. Final day, Rebecca agreed, checking her watch. In 6 hours, the transport ships would return to collect whatever survivors remained. The only other complete team still in the challenge was a group of change-walkers whose natural, shape-shifting abilities had allowed them to adapt to each new crisis as it arose. They had lost 3 of their original 6 members but had never given up entirely. Around the human fire, alien survivors from 8 different species were preparing for extraction. They would not officially complete the challenge, but they had learned something more valuable than victory. They had learned a new way to survive. Attention all remaining participants, came the announcement from the orbital monitoring stations. Transport ships are approaching Baron 7. Final challenge assessment will begin in 1 hour. Rebecca gathered her team for one last equipment check. After 30 days of constant use, their simple tools showed the wear of hard service but remained completely functional. The multi-tool had been used thousands of times for dozens of different tasks. Its blade was worn but sharp. Its pliers still gripped firmly. Every function still worked exactly as designed. Their rope showed signs of stretching and minor fraying but retained full strength. Their tarps had small repairs made with duct tape but remained waterproof. Their fire-starting equipment had been used daily and still produced reliable flames. Remarkable, said Zen, who had been documenting human techniques throughout the challenge. 30 days of extreme use and your equipment shows wear but no failures. That is the difference between our approaches, Rebecca replied. Your technology was designed to work perfectly under ideal conditions. Ours was designed to keep working under terrible conditions. The first transport ship landed in a cloud of dust and toxic vapor. The challenge officials emerged wearing full environmental suits, protected by the same type of advanced technology that had failed so many alien competitors. Congratulations to the surviving teams, announced the head official through his suit's communication system. You have completed the most demanding survival challenge ever conducted. The official's scanner devices began recording the final status of each surviving group. When they reached the human team, the readings caused some confusion among the monitoring staff. These readings cannot be correct, one of them said to another. The humans show no equipment failures, no resource depletion, and no system degradation. Check the scanners, replied the other official. After 30 days on Baron 7, complete system integrity should be impossible. But the readings were accurate. The human team had not just survived the challenge. They had thrived using equipment that the galactic community had dismissed as primitive. How is this possible? The head official asked Rebecca directly. Simple engineering principles, she replied. We brought tools that could not fail in ways that would kill us. Everything else was secondary. The official looked around at the various alien survivors who had learned human techniques during the challenge. And these others? They learned that survival is not about having the best technology, David said. It is about understanding how to keep going when technology fails. As the extraction process began, something unprecedented happened. Instead of immediately boarding the transport ships to return home, many of the alien survivors requested additional time to continue learning human survival techniques. We want to understand more, said Worker 7, speaking for a group of former hive minds who had discovered the advantages of individual decision-making. Our species needs to learn these approaches. Flo, the Tidewalker who had become expert with human construction methods, made a formal request to accompany the human team back to Earth for extended survival training. My people have forgotten too much about basic survival. We need to remember. The request was repeated by representatives from 6 different species. For the first time in galactic history, advanced alien civilizations were asking to learn from a species they had previously considered primitive. The transport ship for the human team was different from the others. Instead of the standard passenger configuration, it had been modified to include a conference room where Rebecca found herself facing a panel of officials from the Intergalactic Survival Council. We need to understand what happened here, said the panel leader, a dignified being with silver skin and 4 arms. According to all projections, the human team should have been eliminated within the first week. Your projections were based on the assumption that advanced technology is always superior to basic technology, Rebecca replied. That assumption was wrong. Explain. Rebecca placed her multi-tool on the table between them. This device represents a different philosophy of engineering. Instead of maximizing any single capability, it maintains multiple capabilities at a sustainable level. Instead of perfect performance under ideal conditions, it provides adequate performance under any conditions. The panel members examined the tool with obvious fascination. Your species approaches survival from a fundamentally different perspective, observed another panel member. Where we see primitive technology, you see reliability engineering. Where you see inefficiency, we see redundancy, David added, joining the conversation. Where you see multiple backup systems, we see the difference between surviving and not surviving when the primary system fails. The panel spent hours questioning the human team about their methods, their philosophy, and their approach to risk management. What emerged was a picture of a species that had learned to thrive in uncertainty, while others had learned to eliminate uncertainty through technology. But surely, said one panel member, advanced technology is objectively superior to primitive tools. Advanced technology is superior when it works, Lisa replied. But all technology fails eventually. The question is, what happens to you when it fails? 3 days later, the Galactic Broadcasting Network aired a special report that would reshape interspecies relationships throughout the known universe. The Baron 7 challenge has concluded, announced Wisp, the gas-based reporter who had learned to function in solid form using human techniques. Humanity has not only won the survival challenge, but has revolutionized our understanding of survival technology. The report detailed how human primitive methods had outperformed advanced alien technology in every category that mattered for survival: equipment reliability, resource efficiency, adaptability, and crisis response. What we initially saw as technological inferiority, Wisp continued, was actually technological sophistication of a type we had never encountered. Human engineering prioritizes function over form, reliability over efficiency, and adaptability over specialization. The impact was immediate and profound. Within weeks, alien governments were requesting human consultants for emergency planning. Technology companies across 12 star systems began redesigning their products using human reliability principles. The Intergalactic Survival Council established the human doctrine as the new standard for emergency preparedness. Always prepare for the worst-case scenario using the simplest, most reliable methods available. Universities. throughout the galaxy began offering courses in primitive technology applications and human-style engineering philosophy. The multi-tool became a symbol of intelligent design, copied and adapted by dozens of species. But perhaps the most significant change was in how advanced civilizations viewed the relationship between technology and survival. "The humans taught us something we had forgotten," said Zen in his final interview before returning to his homeworld. "Survival is not about controlling your environment perfectly. It is about adapting to your environment when control fails." Rebecca's last official act as challenge winner was to address the Intergalactic Council directly. For thousands of years, she told the assembled representatives, humanity survived and thrived using nothing but basic tools and our ability to adapt. We learned that the most important technology is not the most advanced technology. It is the technology that works when everything else fails. The Council voted unanimously to establish permanent human survival training programs on 12 different worlds. The species that had once mocked human primitive technology now competed to learn from it. As the human team finally returned to Earth, they carried with them something unprecedented: formal recognition from the galaxy's most advanced civilizations that sometimes the best way forward was the simplest way that actually worked. The challenge on Baron 7 had ended, but humanity's real victory was just beginning. They had taught the universe that true advancement was not about building more complex systems, but about building systems that could survive complexity. And in a universe full of dangers that no technology could completely predict or prevent, that was the most valuable lesson of all.